I address you all today, not just as Ibrahim Traoré, but as a voice of resistance, of my people, of Africa, of all who have been exploited, undermined, and dismissed by forces beyond their border. I stand before you, before the world, deeply troubled, deeply outraged, because Scotland Yard has issued an arrest warrant in my name. A warrant. For what? On whose mandate? Do they believe that I, a leader chosen by my people, will kneel? Prime Minister Starmer, I speak directly to you now, not through intermediaries, not through the filters of your press, but openly before the world. This act that your government and its agencies have undertaken is not acceptable. It is not simply a piece of paper signed in an office somewhere in London. It is a deliberate act of interference, of humiliation, and of colonial overreach, dressed up in the sterile language of legality. You have taken the tools of law and draped them over the old tactics of domination. You have tried to disguise coercion as justice, but we see through it, and I will not accept it. You must understand, Prime Minister, that I am not here to grovel before you or any other Western power. I do not stand here seeking permission. I do not stand here begging for validation. I stand here as a man entrusted with the hopes of a nation, the aspirations of a people who have for generations been silenced, stripped of their dignity, and told to submit. I will not bow my head to foreign powers who for centuries dictated the fate of my continent. Not now, not ever. Your warrant may carry the seal of Scotland Yard, but it also carries the heavy weight of history that your country has yet to fully reckon with. It carries the echoes of ships and chains, of borders drawn without consent, of leaders chosen not by their people, but by outside forces who saw them as pliant tools. It carries the memory of resources taken and lives diminished. And it carries the arrogance of a mindset that believes it can still, in the 21st century, reach across oceans and strip a sovereign leader of his legitimacy because he will not play by your rules. You may call this rule of law, you may call it international standards, but the people who watch you know what it really is. A weaponization of legal instruments to maintain control, a continuation of the same old system, dressed in new robes. And I say to you plainly, Prime Minister, that I do not accept it. My nation does not accept it. I am not blind to the motivations behind this act. It is not about justice. It is about power. It is about our gold, our oil, our untapped potential, our refusal to sign away our future to multinational interests who come to our lands with contracts written in languages our people do not speak, but whose consequences they will live with for generations. It is about the fear that if Burkina Faso and others like it stand upright, you will lose your hold on the mechanisms of extraction and manipulation that have enriched a few at the expense of the many. So let me be clear, Prime Minister Starmer. The era of subservience is over. The time when a warrant from a foreign capital could cow an African leader into silence is over. The days when threats disguised as legal actions could make us kneel are over. You may have your institutions, your courts, your media, but we have something stronger. The will of a people who are awake and unafraid. This is why I speak directly to you. This is why I call this act what it is. This is why I reject it with every fiber of my being. Because the future we are building cannot coexist with the habits of the past. And because, for the sake of my people and all who have been treated as mere pawns in global games, I will stand. I will not kneel, not now, not ever. You issue this warrant under the pretense of law. You wrap it in the vocabulary of courts, statutes, and procedures. You hold it up as if it were some shining emblem of impartiality, of morality, of fairness. But I ask you, and I ask the world to hear me as I do so, under what law, under whose justice? What justice is this, when the very foundations of your action are built on power, on coercion, on centuries of imbalance? You call it legality, yet it is nothing more than a familiar tool, sharpened once again to cut down those who dare to stand upright. You speak of justice as though it were a neutral concept, as though it floated above history, above politics, above the endless transactions that have drained my continent for centuries. But justice without context is just a mask for domination. Which law do you invoke when you reach across seas and borders to invade the sovereignty of a people who are striving, honestly, painfully, to rise on their own terms? Which code do you cite when you threaten a leader who has committed himself not to war or to plunder, but to the lifting of his nation, my nation, from the chains of dependency? You cannot point to any law that legitimizes what you are doing, because what you are doing is not lawful, it is not moral, it is not justice. It is interference dressed up in legal robes. When you sign a warrant against me, you are not punishing corruption or crime, you are punishing independence. You are punishing the audacity to dream of a nation that no longer kneels. You are punishing the act of taking back what is ours, our gold, our oil, our soil, our voice. This is the crime in your eyes, not theft, but defiance, not fraud, but freedom. Do you not see the hypocrisy? For decades, leaders before me sold our future to foreign interests, and not a single warrant came from your courts. They bled us dry, handed over our resources at bargain prices, enriched themselves and your companies, and still you smiled and called them partners. You honored them. You gave them platforms. You invited them to your banquets. No law was invoked then, no warrants were issued then. But when a leader stands up and says no more, suddenly you discover justice. Suddenly your police and your courts awaken. Suddenly you dress the old imperial instinct in legal terminology and expect us to bow. This is why your pretense of law does not impress me. This is why your rhetoric of justice does not move me. Law without sovereignty is just coercion. Justice without equality is just domination. The people of Burkina Faso know the difference. We know that your warrant is not a shield for the innocent, but a weapon aimed at the independent. We know that your talk of legality is a disguise for economic fear, for political panic, for the desire to protect a system in which our riches flow outward and our people remain poor. And I say to you, as clearly as I can, we will not be deceived. We will not be shamed. We will not be dragged back into a time when foreign signatures decided our fate. Your warrant, your pretense, your invocation of law cannot erase the reality of what is happening. A people rising, a continent awakening, a leader refusing to be a puppet. That is not a crime. That is not a violation. That is justice. The real justice unfolding at last on African soil. I condemn in the strongest and clearest terms this so-called warrant. I do not merely disagree with it, I repudiate it completely. I strip it of any moral or political veneer. I expose it for what it truly is. It is not justice, it is not law, it is a blunt instrument, wielded by those who cannot persuade, who cannot win hearts, who cannot tolerate the sight of a free people standing on their own feet. I reject its legitimacy with every fiber of my being, because legitimacy does not come from the stamp of a foreign office. It comes from the consent of the governed, from the will of a sovereign people, from the moral force of truth. That you do not have. I see through this act, and I name it plainly. It is a strategy, calculated and deliberate. It is not the spontaneous decision of a court acting independently. It is the coordinated move of a system that has long feared an Africa that governs itself. It is a message written not on paper, but on the consciousness of every leader who dares to say no to the old order. And the message is this: comply or suffer. Bend the knee, or we will break you. Sign the contracts, or we will smear you. Abandon your people, or we will drag your name through the mud of our institutions. This is the real content of the warrant. It is a warning, a signal, a flare shot across the skies to every nation that might be tempted to chart its own path. It says, look at him. See what happens to those who resist. See what awaits anyone who tries to keep their gold, their oil, their dignity. It is meant to isolate, to frighten, to intimidate, to coerce. It is meant to make us doubt ourselves, to divide us, to plant seeds of fear in our hearts. But they have miscalculated, because we do not tremble in the face of intimidation. Our history is a history of struggle. Our mothers and fathers endured chains, famine, war, and still they stood. You cannot frighten a people who have already survived the worst that could be inflicted on them. We do not yield to coercion. We are not a soft target for psychological warfare. We are not a leaderless mob that can be turned against itself by a press release from a foreign capital. We are a people, a government, a movement, anchored in the belief that dignity is non-negotiable. We know that the cost of submission is always higher than the cost of resistance. We know that every resource signed away, every contract imposed under duress, every humiliation accepted quietly becomes a debt that our children must repay with their futures. We will not pay that price. We do not comply with injustice. We do not accept as law what is merely coercion with paperwork. We do not accept as justice what is in fact a punishment for independence. Our refusal is not born of arrogance, but of clarity. We know who we are. We know what is ours. We know that our destiny cannot be written by others, and that no piece of paper, no foreign police, no courtroom thousands of miles away can erase the will of a sovereign people. So let this warrant be a warning not to us, but to those who issued it. Your methods are exposed, your intentions revealed, your masks slipping. You wanted to send a message of fear. Instead, you have sent a message of your own desperation. We will answer it not with silence or submission, but with defiance, unity, and an even deeper commitment to our freedom. Because intimidation only strengthens our resolve. Coercion only clarifies our mission. Injustice only steals our hearts. To the British government, to your judicial apparatus, to your intelligence services, understand this. Interference of this magnitude is not acceptable in the 21st century. We live in a world where sovereignty is supposed to be respected, where the decisions of a sovereign people are theirs to make. Yet here you are, reaching across oceans and borders, trying to drag us, back to the old era of puppet leaders, of extraction, of silence. This does not happen because of any crime committed by me. It happens because we are rich. Rich in what matters, rich in gold, rich in oil, rich in possibility, rich in courage, rich in the unquenchable desire to take control of our destiny. And you fear that. You fear our growth, you fear our rising, you fear that once we stand fully upright, your old mechanisms of control, corruption, dependency, debt, extraction, will crumble, and they should. You think we are unaware. You think that we will quietly accept that the lands under our feet, the skies over our heads, the oil under our soil, the gold in our hills, all of that belongs to you. But let me tell you, those resources belong to my people, to our children, to our future, and no warrant, no threat, no fancy courtroom in London or anywhere else can rescind that. Why now? Why this moment? You observe our progress, you see our plans, you see infrastructures rising, you see schools, hospitals, roads being built. You see our diplomacy growing, our voice strengthening. You see that we are turning away from dependency toward self-reliance. And that terrifies you. Better perhaps. You feared that so many before us were your tools. Leaders you placed in power, leaders you supported lavishly while they looted our resources, wrought havoc on our people, and enriched themselves and their foreign backers, yet delivered nothing but stagnation, poverty, submission. And so now, in the face of someone who refuses to be your puppet, you try to isolate me, discredit me, intimidate me. But your methods are old, outdated, colonial. They are not going to work. They will never work again. Not in Burkina Faso, not in Africa, not in nations that know their worth. You want to accuse me of crimes? Show the evidence. Prove your case. But this is nothing more than posturing, a theatrical performance to send a message. And the message is resist. And you will be dragged into the mechanisms of foreign justice, the courts, the warrants, the accusations, that you may lose your dignity, your freedom. But hear me now. I will not be intimidated. My people will not be intimidated. We will not kneel. Prime Minister Starmer, your government must decide. Will you continue this dangerous game of meddling in sovereign affairs under the guise of law and morality? Or will you choose the path of respect, the path of diplomacy, the path of equal footing, because there is another world and we are building it, one founded not on subservience but mutual respect, not on exploitation but partnership, not on your writ over us but our rightful exercise of our agency. To the people of Burkina Faso, of Africa, and to all those who believe in justice, do not be shaken. This warrant, this attempt at coercion, is evidence that we are doing something right, that our movement, our vision, is a threat to old orders that preferred us broken. We are writing new chapters. You have seen those chapters begin, and they will continue. We rise not as rebels without cause, but as people with purpose. Our goal is not revenge or anger. It is dignity. It is development. It is autonomy. We will develop our lands, use our gold, harness our oil for our people, not for multinational corporations who strip our soil and leave our nations impoverished. We will build our schools, our hospitals, our roads. We will elevate our sovereignty. We will refine our resources here. We will negotiate on equal terms, not beg or be threatened. I urge the international community, look closely. This is not a question of one man versus another government. It is a question of whether the rights of sovereign nations will be respected, whether the era of infiltration by foreign judicial instruments for political ends will be tolerated. Because if you allow this, you open the door wide for every power that has ever looted something, resources, sovereignty, dignity, to continue their deeds unchallenged. Prime Minister Starmer, you may have the media, the networks, the international institutions that favor your narrative, that spin your stories in newspapers and channels at your command, but truth has weight. Truth has power, and we will tell our truth. We will name the names, we will expose the pattern. How leaders were installed, manipulated, bought, how resources were siphoned away, how entire nations were impoverished while the few grew fat behind closed doors with the backing of foreign powers who preferred the old order. This is not about me alone. This is about all of us. This is about future generations who deserve the right to inherit a Burkina Faso, an Africa that is self-determined, a continent that determines its own destiny, that sets its own direction, that profits from its own richness, that builds without begging, that stands without waiting for approval. So to you who issued this warrant, reconsider, retract this act of interference, apologize for this overreach, engage with us as equals. If you have concerns, bring them to the table. If you have jurisdiction, prove it. If you have law on your side, present it. But if you act out of fear of our emergence, out of desire to preserve old hierarchies, then let this be your record, that you tried, but that you could not stop what was coming. Because no warrant, no court, no foreign power can arrest the rising spirit of a people who know their worth. No warrant can silence the song of nations waking up to themselves. No legal edict written in distant halls can chain the will of those determined to break free. People of Burkina Faso, people of Africa, this moment may be fraught, but let it be known, this warrant only reveals the fragility of those who fear change. It shows how threatened the status quo is. We were right to assert our dignity. We were right to choose leaders who serve, not those who sell. We were right to build infrastructure, education, health, defense, not for foreign profit, but for our flourishing. We were right to say no to exploitative contracts, harmful foreign control, and backroom deals that enrich a few and impoverish many, and let the world watch. Because when injustice is done, we speak. When our sovereignty is compromised, we rise. When we are threatened with arrest because of our ambition, we declare, we will not kneel. I repeat, Prime Minister Starmer, this is your call. Will you persist in acts that resemble colonial overreach, or will you choose a path of respect and dialogue? Will you stand on the side of interference, or will you stand on the side of sovereignty? The world watches. History records, and I am confident the moral arc bends toward justice. I am Ibrahim Traoré. I will not kneel. I will not yield. I stand firm for Burkina Faso, for Africa, for every people who have waited too long to be free. And to those who say this is about me, know this: my name is but a symbol. What this arrest warrant targets is not a single man. It is the idea of empowered Africa. It is the dream of nations that stand unbowed. It is all of us. So let this warrant be your testament that you tried to stop our rise. And let this fight be our affirmation that we will rise anyway, with dignity, with sovereignty, with pride, and with peace. Thank you.